Oral questions by members.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, after a year of hardship, anxiety, and stress for parents of children with autism, this Premier announced a long overdue reversal of the NDP's planned attempt to strip individualized funding from parents and force them to transition to a hub model. However, his actions are not matching his words. This Premier and his NDP government are continuing with their top-down approach and the hub model that parents soundly rejected. Yesterday, the First Nations Leadership Council wrote to the Premier to express what they say is their deep concern with the NDP decision to plunge forward with this discredited model. And I quote from the letter, "On April 28, 2023, we were suddenly informed that despite the explicit commitments made in November, the Ministry of Children and Family Development has progressed with its unilateral plan." End of quote. This stubborn refusal by the NDP to reverse their policy will have disastrous consequences for parents with autistic kids right across the province. So my question is this: why has the Premier betrayed First Nations and parents of autistic kids across the province who campaigned for over a year to halt this damaging policy?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. Our government believes very strongly that every parent that has a kid that has special needs to be supported in the services that are responsive to their child's particular needs, what's working for their kid. And that's why we committed to parents with individualized funding that they will be able to continue with the care arrangements that they've put in place that are working for their child. We also know there are a lot of kids that, for one reason or another, including that they don't have a formal autism diagnosis, aren't getting that care through the individualized model, which is why the Minister of Children and Family has been doing work to close that gap and to work with community. We have redoubled our pledge to work with community and with First Nations on this work, and there have been a number of meetings to further that engagement, to make sure that the model we come up with is evidence-based, is supportive of the unique needs of kids, First Nations kids, as well as kids generally that aren't getting the support under the current system. And we're clear about that. There is, however, Honourable Speaker, a challenge, and that is that we also have obligations to individual First Nations. So when they come to the Minister and they say, we want to work with you on developing something that works for our kids on nation, they have that right to have that discussion with the Minister, and that is a separate process from this broad provincial strategy that we're pursuing. We're working with the First Nations Leadership Council to clarify that. We believe we have obligations to these individual nations to have those discussions, and we hope we can clear all of this up because we all have the same shared goal, which is making sure these kids have the supports they need.
Leader of the Official Opposition, supplemental.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the problem with that answer, Premier, is that's diametrically opposite to what they're actually saying in their letter. And I remind this House, it was only after a widespread backlash and the fierce resistance of parents from across the province that this government eventually backed down under pressure. But the problem we have here is we had the government saying that publicly they would reverse their policy, and then privately we're doing exactly the opposite. This is what else the First Nation Leadership Council wrote in their letter, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, "This is in direct violation of what was agreed to and perpetuates the approach that was explicitly rejected." End of quote. This NDP decision to plunge forward with their discredited hub transition model is devastating for families right across this province with neurodiverse kids. And we're not going to let this Premier or this government break the word they gave to parents with autistic kids. And so my question is to the Premier, how can anyone have any trust in this Premier after he announced a reversal of the discredited hub model only to forge ahead with that model when the political heat had died down?
Premier.
Oh, Honourable Speaker, the member is simply not correct. We assured parents that have individualized funding they're going to be able to continue with that funding, those supports that work for their kids. That is my commitment to them. It was one of the first actions I took after being sworn in as Premier, because it is important to me, it's important to our government that parents, especially parents that have kids that have these unique needs, don't face additional stress. And it was clear that they were under additional stress when the whole plan was to provide additional supports to these kids that didn't have the care. So reassuring to those parents, they will be able to continue with those care arrangements. There are a huge number of families that are not covered under that system. Their kid doesn't have that formal autism diagnosis. They are under as much stress. They are worried about care for their kids. We have to provide care for those kids. And we want to do it in a way that's respectful of First Nations. We want to do it in a way that's evidence-based and responsive to the needs of those families. That's why the minister committed. She's been having meetings with parents, with key stakeholders, with First Nations on designing that system. Now, there is a separate process. When a nation approaches the ministry and says, we want to talk to you about how we deliver care to our kids in our community that we have jurisdiction over, the minister, under our legislation, we believe, has an obligation to engage with that nation and find a path forward. And we're doing that work as well. First of all, any parent that's watching right now that has a kid with special needs like this, we are working to make sure whether you have individualized funding, that continues. And if you don't have access to that program, we know the stress you're under, and we are working to deliver a model that will deliver care for you that's evidence-based, that looks after kids, because that's what we want to prioritize here. That's what we want to deliver for every parent in British Columbia.
Member for Surrey White Rock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2020, the Premier's liaison for renters, the MLA for Vancouver West End, relocated his primary residence from Vancouver to the Greater Victoria region on Vancouver Island. Since then, he has charged taxpayers for frequent day trips on Helijet, Harbour Air from his primary residence in Greater Victoria to his constituency in Vancouver. My question is to the Premier. As Vancouver renters are facing the most expensive rents in the country, does the Premier think it's appropriate for his liaison for renters, the MLA for Vancouver West End, to expense the cost of frequently commuting from his primary residence in Greater Victoria to his constituency in Vancouver?
Government House Leader.
Thank you so much, Honourable Speaker, and certainly the member will know that we take the use of public dollars and how they're spent very seriously. I'll take the member's question on notice and report back to the House.
Member for Surrey White Rock Supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And taxpayers reasonably expect in this province for an MLA to travel from their constituency to work at the legislature. But it isn't reasonable for an MLA to feel entitled to move their primary residence to Greater Victoria.
Member,
and then
Minister has taken that question on notice, so let's have a new question. Is it a new question?
it's a new question.
Okay, that's fine, then proceed.
Mr. Speaker, the taxpayers of British Columbia deserve accountability. They expect the accountability from all of us in this legislature. We have a duty to uphold that. Since relocating that primary residence to Greater Victoria, the taxpayers have absorbed $70,000 in expenses. How could the Premier, in the Premier's decision to appoint this MLA as his liaison for renters, how could this Premier justify that?
Member, it's the same question. Members, the House Leader of Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During last fall's legislative session, the now Minister for Post-Secondary Education said, our children are, quote, the most precious resource we have, end quote. I agree with the Minister on that, but this government's actions do not reflect the rhetoric, Mr. Speaker. The reality is public schools in British Columbia have been chronically underfunded for years, with school boards across the province continuing to face budget shortfalls as a result of this government's policies. Vancouver School Board is facing a $5.9 million shortfall this year, forcing the board to choose between actions like combining high school classes together, moving or discontinuing valuable educational programs, or relocating students to cover the deficit. The much smaller Saanich School District is looking for $1.7 million, likely to be funded out of reserves, Mr. Speaker. This progressive government, or so-called progressive government, promised to do better for our children than the 16 years that they complained about the previous government. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Premier, will he reverse the more than 2 decades of underfunding in our public education system?
Government House Leader.
Thank you so much, Honourable Speaker, and I want to thank the member for his question. The member will know, and we have and numerous times in this House spoken about the importance of education for our kids. I know the Minister of Education finds that the most important role that she has, and most important role as both as a mom as well as Minister of Education, is making sure that all kids in our communities have the funding that's needed. The member will know that funding per student has gone up by 24% since 2017. That's a significant increase in funding. We've seen significant funding for building new schools, making sure that we have educators available, and we're going to continue to do that, Honourable Speaker, because we know that investments in our children are investments in the future.
Member Supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we just heard in this response, the government has continually claimed that they fixed the problems in public education, but the reality that many school districts are facing in this province reflect a completely different reality. It's essentially an austerity system in our public education system. We often hear about the record investments that have been made under this BC NDP government, but those, Mr. Speaker, are disingenuous. The court required many of those investments to be made, and a new agreement with teachers, an important investment, absolutely, in our teachers, does nothing to support the replacing the aging tech and teaching materials that many of our school districts are facing, and many other structural deficits that they're facing every single budget year, including this year. In 2018, this government's review panel report recommended changes to the funding model. In the first couple of years, there was a flurry of activity, but in the last couple of years, Mr. Speaker, there's been silence. Nothing in the minister's mandate letter, nothing in the service plan about those recommendations. It appears to not be a priority for this Premier. The members of this government know that we need to do better, given how frequently they eviscerated the official opposition now for underfunding education when they sat on this side of the House. The needs of students and teachers need to be put first, Mr. Speaker. We've seen this Premier roll out the Homes for People plan and the Jobs for Workers plan. When are we going to see a public education for students plan, Mr. Speaker?
Government House Leader.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and there was a lot there, and I want to thank the member for the question. Yes, we're very proud of the Homes for People plan that we've launched. We're very proud of our Future Ready plan that was announced just recently, making sure that all people in British Columbia, young, those that are transitioning in the workplace, have the opportunities to get the skills they need to be able to be competitive in the market. Honourable Speaker, I think it's important for the member to know, which I've already highlighted, that we've increased the budget for education by 24%, per student funding by 24% since 2017. I'm glad he highlighted the agreement that we had with the teachers, Honourable Speaker, because those investments are about making sure we support our educators to make sure that we're able to provide the highest level of education. Now, the member will also know that when we formed government, we were the second worst when it came to funding in the country, and now we are the second best, Honourable Speaker, and our goal is always to continue to improve that.
Member for Nechako Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I mentioned in my introduction to the gallery today with the healthcare professionals that are here, I just thought I would highlight some of the people that are here. They've come as far away as Nelson, come from across the Lower Mainland, across the island, include many doctors, family doctors, radiologists, surgeons, naturopaths, other people, for example, traditional medicine, many nurses from across the thing, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and so many more. And there is many outside as well. And they've all come here today because they have a concern with Bill 36. They have a concern with our healthcare system. And they're here today to express those concerns. And in particular, they're concerned about the privacy of individual and their patients' records. They're concerned about the ability to be able to provide professional medical advice based on their experience. They're concerned about, of course, the crisis in BC's healthcare system. And they think Bill 36 is a massive overreach by government that will only cause additional problems in our healthcare system. I've asked the Minister of Health, Mr. Speaker, to pause the implementation of Bill 36 and to do a comprehensive engagement with the healthcare professionals across this province. To the Premier, since the Minister won't commit to doing this, will you instruct the Minister of Health to stop the implementation of Bill 36 until a full and comprehensive engagement with healthcare professionals across BC has been undertaken?
Minister of Health.
Well, thank you. Bill 36, Honourable Speaker, represented the first major amendment to the Health Professions Act in 3 decades. In 2018, I asked for an investigation and review by a world-leading expert, Harry Caton, into the Health Professions Act. Subsequent to that, members of the New Democratic Caucus, myself, members from the Official Opposition Caucus, members of the Green Caucus, came together to review that report and to make recommendations, all of which were reflected in Bill 36. That process involved extraordinary public engagement. More than 4,300 people participated in that public engagement, 71% of whom were health professionals. Subsequent to that, we had an engagement with First Nations because in the midst of that process, we had the in plain sight report, and we had, Honourable Speaker, a significant requirement under reconciliation to engage with First Nations. Subsequent to that, Honourable Speaker, we had a 47.5-hour debate in this legislature, Honourable Speaker, the second longest debate on any bill in this century.
Members. Let's hear the answer, please. Minister will continue.
The legislation protects patients, empowers patients, Honourable Speaker, provides protection when people bring forward complaints, Honourable Speaker, including supports, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, I just say to the members opposite, our focus, the focus of the committee, the focus of the opposition, the Green Party that worked on that committee, was protecting patients, Honourable Speaker. And that's exactly what the legislation
Members will come to order. Members. Minister will continue.
Honourable Speaker, I can tell you that the consultation we did, unprecedented in the history of the province, did not involve people yelling at each other. Honourable Speaker, I would say this, Honourable Speaker, that the concerns raised by the Honourable Member, including concerns about access to patient records, reflect areas that are absolutely unchanged from the present legislation. And I suggest in his decades in the legislature, he might have raised those concerns if he'd had them at the time, Honourable Speaker. The fact of the matter is there is no change when an independent investigator investigates, for example, a concern around sexual abuse. They have a right under limited circumstances to access patient records. That's what it is now. That's what it will be after Bill 36 is proclaimed.
Member for Nichaco Lake, supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for that answer. The engagement that he talks about, this broad engagement, did not include the full scope of what's in this bill, what's in Bill 36. That engagement with the opposition members did not include the full scope of what is in that bill. There is a crisis in our healthcare system today. These professionals have taken time out of their profession, away from being able to provide the services. They've taken time away from their family. They've traveled across this province to be here to express their concern because they have a legitimate concern about our healthcare system in the province of British Columbia. They have a legitimate concern for their patients. Mr. Speaker, to me, to the thousands of people that signed the petition that I will be introducing after question period today, they have expressed these concerns. They want answers. They are angry. And I can tell you, the health professionals here, they want to be part of the answer. They want to be part of being able to provide better services. They don't want this government to be making them an enemy. So, Mr. Speaker, two parts to this question. The first is an ask of the Minister to meet with these healthcare professionals that are here and the ones that are outside to be able to answer questions that they have around this. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, there is a large list of questions that these healthcare providers have gone through. This is a very large bill. They've gone through it in detail. They've provided these questions to the minister. And I want to ask, through you, to the Premier, if he will commit today to asking his minister to answer these questions so these healthcare providers can be fully engaged, and to pause going forward with Bill 36 until that full engagement can be had and we can assure the people in this province that our healthcare system will be improved and not damaged by the Bill 36.
Thank you. People in the gallery, please be careful. Don't make any responses to any questions or answer. Minister of Health.
Honourable Speaker, this piece of legislation, which reflects the recommendation of the In Plain Sight report, that reflects the recommendations of the all-party committee that reviewed it, Honourable Speaker, takes a proactive approach to the elimination of discrimination in our healthcare system. Anybody who read the In Plain Sight report and doesn't think that action should be taken urgently, and this is action that's been taken after 5 years of consultation of thousands of health professionals, Honourable Speaker. And my strong view is, Honourable Speaker, my strong view is that a bill that empowers the public, that says when there's a contrary action, not when there's a complaint, when there's a contrary action, that there should be transparency for patients in our province. That's long overdue, Honourable Speaker. When you have a bill, Honourable Speaker,
members.
that takes proactive action against discrimination after the In Plain Sight report, after a significant consultation with First Nations under both the reconciliation provisions and the In Plain Sight working group, Honourable Speaker, that it's time to act against discrimination in healthcare. It's time to act to protect patients. It's time to act, Honourable Speaker, to bring the bill in the 20th century. That is why we did 5 years of consultation, Honourable Speaker. And when we had those meetings together, Honourable Speaker, the opposition parties and ourselves, it wasn't one side yelling at the other side, Honourable Speaker, one side trying to prove that they can be more objectionable than another party, Honourable Speaker. That's what we did in BC. We put together a system of...
Members will come to order. Members will come to order now. Members, please. Minister will conclude.
Honourable Speaker, all of that consultation took place, I think, in an atmosphere of respect. 5 years of it, thousands of health professionals, full involvement of the opposition, full involvement of Indigenous people. We're proud of the legislation, Honourable Speaker, and we're going to continue to work on its implementation. Since we passed the bill, there's been more than 50 meetings, Honourable Speaker, with representative groups. We're going to continue to do the work and continue to improve protections for patients and the regulation of health for health professionals in BC.
Member for Kelowna Mission.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, let's listen to the question, please. Let's hear the question.
Yesterday, while the Jobs Minister continued with more talk about more discussions, about more meetings, small businesses endured another day of rampant crime and vandalism. Imagine being Nick Way of Social Pets in Kelowna, waking up to destroyed windows and constant vandalism. Over 30 businesses along Pandosy Street in Kelowna recently suffered losses in the tens of thousands. Will the minister stand up today, put an end to the empty talk, endless discussions, and absolute rhetoric, and actually take action to help small businesses in BC?
Minister of Jobs and Economic Development.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. There is no doubt that a number of businesses are faced with significant challenges. We've seen global inflation, we've seen tremendous economic uncertainty, and we have taken action to support small businesses, Mr. Speaker. During the pandemic, we stood up almost $500 million, in fact, more than $500 million. That shows the priority that small businesses have to this government. It's so important, Mr. Speaker. When we put in programming for small businesses, the priority is to ensure that the programming is what they need, it's what they want, and it's going to have impact. A great example of this is when we worked with restaurants, talking to industry and working with the people that are impacted. We put in 2 supports that were very, very beneficial. One is ensuring that restaurants had access to wholesale pricing for liquor. That benefited every restaurant in our province. We also brought in a cap to fee delivery services. These are examples of working directly with industry to hear what's important to them. We're doing that work right now. We'll be rolling out programming soon. Small businesses are deeply important to us.
For Kamloops North Thompson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government is developing quite a pattern of not wanting proper scrutiny and questioning of things that they're bringing forward. As we heard with Bill 36, 400 sections had closure brought on by this government, regardless of debate time leading up to that. And in fact, our motion to refer those 400 sections to the Health Committee was quashed by this government to have proper review of the report. But, Mr. Speaker, it's not just these types of things that this government wants to quash. We heard 2 months ago that the BC Housing forensic audit had been completed. 2 months. And as much as the government wants to try to say that they're committed to full disclosure, it's been 2 months of redaction after redaction after redaction and no release date. Now, yesterday I asked the Premier if he would commit to releasing the report before his budget estimates start next week. Unfortunately, the Housing Minister answered and decided to deflect and use the same language again. No commitment. Convenient, given that the Housing Minister's budget estimates are now over. The Premier full well knows that budget estimates would be the best way to have full transparency and full questioning of the forensic audit of BC Housing, especially given he was the Housing Minister for the better part of 2 years. Will the Premier commit today to releasing the full, unredacted report, forensic audit of BC Housing, in time for his estimates starting next week?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Two issues raised in the member's question. I'll take them both in order. One is on Bill 36. Now, I understand the opposition now is taking the position that they weren't involved in all the engagement that the Health Minister laid out over 5 years on developing this work. And I'll say this, Honourable Speaker. I'll say this.
Members, please.
I don't agree with the leader of the Conservative Party on his position, but at least I know what it is. Okay? When it comes to the opposition wants to have it both ways on so many different issues. They need to take positions. Now, on the issue of housing, where they also take multiple positions. First of all, on the BC Housing audit, absolutely. I understand it's important for the members to have a chance to ask questions on this report. We'll release it, and I committed to this House to table it in this place and to table as much of the report as the law allows us to provide to them and to the public, and to have ample opportunity for them to ask questions about it. We have a really serious housing issue in this province. And I think on the theme of the opposition and housing and clarity of position, to have the opposition standing against basic ideas like allowing someone that has a single family home to develop more than one unit on that property, for them to stand up in opposition to that, the most affordable kind of housing that can be built, for them to oppose that, for them to vote against the housing targets before they voted for them, Honourable Speaker. The lack of clarity from this opposition on C36, on housing, on so many issues like addiction and mental health, I look forward to them developing their policies so we can have a real debate in this place.
Member for Kamloops North Thompson supplemental.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and let's correct what the Premier was trying to convey to the public. There has been no ambiguity by us on Bill 36. We voted against Bill 36. There was 400 clauses that this government invoked closure on, and newsflash for the Premier, the opposition was not part of the drafting of the actual legislation of Bill 36. The first time we saw it was when it came to this House.
Members.
But Mr. Speaker, once again, the Premier is being evasive with his answer around the BC housing audit. He just committed to tabling it in this House. The problem is he wouldn't give a date. Well, it's pretty simple. We have 4 sitting days after today left, and then it's the fall. The question was around tabling it so that we could deal with it during budget estimates for the Premier that start next Wednesday. So will the Premier be releasing it on Monday next week or Tuesday next week, or is his intention to table it in this House but not till the fall?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. 2 issues raised by the member in that question. On the issue of tabling the audit, absolutely. The audit will be tabled in this House. I've committed to this House, so the members will have opportunity to ask questions about
members,
session, Honourable
please.
Speaker. This session, Honourable Speaker.
Members, calm down.
And
calm down.
on the second, Honourable Speaker, I know the members don't want me to get to the second issue, but I will get there, Honourable Speaker. On the second question, Honourable Speaker, the members did, in fact, vote against Bill C-36, or Bill 36. But of course, that was after they voted for it at second reading.
The bell ends the question period.